Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Morning for anyone who's joining from a different time zone. Welcome to our PMI Montgomery County chapter lunch and learn for the month of October. As promised, at recent meetings and events, we're trying to get out of the norm of just offering first Wednesday of the month dinners, and we know that the evenings are hard for some, so work with everyone's schedules and offer different events throughout the month. So this will be a sign of things to come, and we appreciate you taking your lunch hour to join us. We will be posting this to our chapter YouTube channel later on this afternoon, and as making sure that PDU claim code is available for all on-demand watchers. So speaking of PDUs, we know that the first day of the symposium PDU batch file went through earlier than the second one. The second one should be posting today. So hopefully you'll be seeing that credited to your account before the end of today's session. So we apologize for the delay and the confusion there that you got credit for one day, but not the second day. Okay, registration is now open for our 20th anniversary member appreciation dinner. For longtime members, we've always prided ourselves, even during the 2020 pandemic year, of offering the free dinner in the month of November. So that registration is open. That'll be Wednesday, November 6th at That's Amore Restaurant. We're excited to welcome back the Leadership Techniques team of Lisa Hammer and David Newman, who will be presenting on servant leadership in the 21st century digital age. They also will be raffling off 2 signed copies of their recent literary work, The Engagement Matrix. So we're excited for that and looking forward to filling up the That's Amore banquet space with the 220 fire marshal capacity that we have. Malcolm Gladwell has been on the speaking circuit for his most recent book that was released earlier this month, Revenge of the Tipping Point, Overstory, Super Spreaders, and the Rise of Social Engineering. So we have 1 signed copy to raffle off of that that I attended at his book talk at George Washington University earlier this month. So if you get a free dinner, PDU and a half, and an opportunity to get a signed book. So hopefully we'll see everyone on this call here. Okay, and it's our honor to welcome our featured presenter for this afternoon session, Mr. Jonathan Groff. He's currently serving as the U.S. Air Force Modernized IT Platform Executive Sponsor for all the Air Force's human resources and talent management systems and solutions. He's had various leadership roles across the private sector during his 15 plus and growing career. Fun fact, he's a certified Korean cryptic language analyst and speaks fluent in Korean. So if anyone can either speak or write Korean, feel free to throw that in the chat. And another fun fact is that he has 6 acting credits on IMDb. So not only do we have a great IT professional here, but we also have an esteemed actor. So we'll turn it over to him, and looking forward to a great session. For those who aren't aware, the Air Force recently returned the warrant officer ranks after let me do the math, 30 plus year discontinuation. This is in an attempt to compete with the private sector for retention and to keep as much of that great talent that the Air Force is investing in the Air Force, and not to leave for the private sector opportunities for growth. So that'll be the foundation of our talk today, and we'll turn over to Mr. Groff. Thank you.
everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. First of all, thank you, yes, for having me here. Really happy and excited to be able to have this opportunity to talk about this project, which I've been working on for the past year, I'd say. When the Secretary of the Air Force originally set the goal of scrolling the first cadre of warrant officers by the end of the calendar year, that was back in uh, January, February timeframe. Uh, I assume you guys can see my screen now. We're good.
Yep, sure can, sir.
Okay. Cool, cool. Just wanted to make sure we don't run into any technical issues. Thank you very much for the warm introduction. Thank you all very much for giving me your time, as I said, and I look forward to talking about this particular project. Reintegrating warrant officers into the Air Force. Specifically, we're going to go into talking about how we leverage a project management tool, namely Strategic Portfolio Management and ServiceNow platform, to track this overall project. It's comprehensive, very complicated project, but there we go. Uh, we're going to start with an overview of what the project is, why we decided to reintegrate warrant officers into the Air Force. And I say reintegrate because we did have warrant officers, as Mr. Lowy pointed out, uh, roughly about 1980-ish was the last warrant officer to leave the military. Then I'm going to talk briefly about strategic leadership in military projects. Military projects aren't much different than projects you would find anywhere else. It's just more intense, if you will. I also talk about gaining buy-in from leaders. There's so many different stakeholders involved in projects like these, and really military project at all, especially one with this great of an impact as this. And is difficult to garner buy-in from everyone. So we'll talk briefly about that, our cross-functional team collaboration, and how we approached bringing everyone together for a discussion, brainstorming about the project, and how we continue to work together to accomplish the goal. And then I'm going to go into how ServiceNow has served us. It doesn't have to be that particular project management tool. We had it available, and it's actually worked really, really well for us. So I'll just briefly go over that, and then we'll talk about the project success. Okay, so why warrant officers? So as we've already pointed out a couple of times, our last active duty warrant officer retired in 1980. We inherited warrant officers from when we came over from the Army, when the Air Force from Air Force came from the Army in 1947. And there wasn't a whole lot of purpose. The senior leaders believed that the superintendent functionality of the senior master sergeants and the chief master sergeant was sufficient enough to warrant not having warrant officers in the Air Force. And so, with the last active duty warrant officer retiring in 1980, the last reserve warrant officer retiring, I believe, in 1980 or 1992, we've had well over 30 years, going on 40 years, of not having warrant officers in the Air Force. This project, of course, aims to reestablish warrant officer rank structure within the Air Force, and it prepares the infrastructure and policies needed to commission the first batch of warrant officers by the end of the year. We're looking to leverage the technical expertise that exists already among our airmen and guardians to cultivate a strategic advantage in areas such as cyber and IT. There was a discussion about warrant officers being for every AFSC, and of course that's still open for discussion, but specifically in the areas of cyber IT when it comes to retaining that talent, that unique talent that we have in those particular career fields, it was important to scope the requirements to be focused on just those things for right now, particularly because there is a broader effort to address the readiness challenges that we have in those career fields and prepare for great power competition with China. So Secretary Kendall has the forethought uh, to to uh, to put us into a better position. Having there's many different efforts, but specifically with retaining that technical expertise, he has the forethought. He had the forethought to push this effort along. So warrant officers are utilized by other branches, of course, namely the Army, Navy, Marine Corps. They're highly technical experts and single track leaders. So the Air Force recognized the value of warrant officers in providing that specialized knowledge and skill and really wanted to take advantage of that. Uh, I also want to highlight some of the key players. I mentioned like there are various stakeholders. Of course, we have the Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary Frank Kendall. We have the Air Education and Training Command, Air University, Air Force Personnel Center, A2 and 6. A2 is Intel and A6 is Cyber. They're currently joined. And many, many other stakeholders, but some of the key stakeholders when it came to the overall objective of scrolling the first cadre by the end of calendar year. So when it comes to being a strategic leader in military projects, strategic leadership starts with aligning the project's objectives with the overarching goal of military leadership. So, for example, in this project, the Secretary of the Air Force's directive on great power competition framed the strategic intent, which required us to enhance force capability by introducing warrant officer ranks again. So when strategic leaders are in situations where they get the orders from the and that's what that little illustration there, the point is like you go do the thing. um it's not viewed as negatively. We have to come together, right, and take the uncertainty and the complexity that is inherent with something like this, and basically just be comfortable with that and come up with dealing with a range of unknowns, from things like regulatory hurdles to how do these new rank structures fit within our existing systems. So effective leaders anticipate these challenges, right, and they try to build flexibility into their plans. And we talk agile a lot. We are traditionally waterfall, and we're moving into more agile project management thinking, and those spaces. So moving along with the times, just a little bit behind, but part of this effort in conjunction with all the other efforts is to get us to where we need to be, right? Where we need to be is agile, right? So when it comes to other qualities that a strategic leader needs in military projects, long-term thinking and sustainability is extremely important. We're not going to uh, see so the military and the government is going to outlive me by a long shot, right? So strategic leaders, they have to ensure that the systems and processes that they put in place today will remain effective and adaptable for future needs. uh, we frequently say, we do this because it's the way we've always done it. That's not exactly true. That means that we haven't built a flexible or adaptable process. And so we always try to work towards building flexible and adaptable processes so that things can change and iterate over time. So we're not saying like this is just how we've always done things. We also need to make data-driven decisions, right? So effective strategic leaders involve using data to make informed decisions. So for this project, ServiceNow's SPM module, Strategic Portfolio Management, allowed us to track progress in real time, make these data-driven adjustments, and provide clear visibility to our senior leaders so they could feel comfortable that we were doing what we needed to do in order to accomplish the overall objective. So this kind of transparency is absolutely essential in large-scale military projects. And we'll talk later about how this all looks and dashboarding capabilities of ServiceNow and all that towards the end of the presentation. Uh, and I talked a little bit about agility, right? I'm going to emphasize that again. Military projects often involve large scale efforts like this one, and strategic leaders focus on iterative progress and agile execution. They're successful. By breaking down this project into manageable phases, we were able to track the project step by step, ensuring that each part of the warrant officer reintegration was on solid ground before moving forward. And when I was involved, so there are different lines of effort, and go into the next one here. So there were different lines of effort. My line of effort to start was understanding the impacts to our HRIT systems. We have a massive portfolio of over 436 different capabilities, ranging from bowling management services like software to like pay and personnel processing, leave, all of that. So the whole gambit of HR. And it was obvious to our senior leaders that our systems would need to be looked at to see like how can we integrate warrant officers, this new grade AFSCs. AFSCs is essentially your job code, right? And so I was tasked with reaching out and figuring out what the impact was. So initially, I understood my task to be uh, to find and evaluate the updates required to adapt our HR systems to accurately incorporate the rank. That included managing our data, updating our user interfaces, and ensuring that we are matching with the compliance and policies, business rules, those kinds of things, regulations. So I gathered up everybody, all the program managers, it was roughly about 80 people in a single meeting. And we used a collaborative workspace in Teams. I created a Teams channel, and in that collaborative workspace during the call, I made use of the whiteboard tool in Teams. It was very, very effective because what I didn't want to have was a huge group of people just talking over each other or having to go like one by one. I wanted to relegate this to just no more than an hour. Typically, I like to relegate things to only more than 30 minutes. So if I can get it down there, then great, but no more than an hour, and to gather as much information as I could about the initial impact without having to continually meet and everything like that. So I made this collaborative workspace with notepads, and I said, look, okay, well, we know where your systems are. We put your system there, and then any ideas that you have about the difficulty associated with reintegrating warrant officers back into the Air Force, put it down there. It doesn't matter, right, wrong, or indifferent. Just let's put it down there. This is a brainstorming session. And then I had in the middle a scale, X and Y axis with a diagonal line across the top. And I asked them to take the notepads that they were writing and put them along the line based on where they assess the overall impact would be to their systems. Roughly out of that, so out of that meeting, we got a rough estimate of the various systems that were impacted from low to middle to high. And it was roughly about 40 out of the hundreds that we have. Many of them were just like, hey, we integrate with the data. As long as the data from our data sources are updated, then our systems will be fine. Maybe we have minimal updates, 1 to 2 sprints of just changing like a user interface, that kind of stuff, but it's no big deal. So after we identified those initial 40, and again, ranging from low impact all the way up to high impact. High impact was like a couple of systems. I presented that to the senior leaders because that was their initial ask. What's the overall impact? Okay, here's our initial assessment. This all happened in the span of about a week. Here's our initial assessment. Here are the systems that we know. And our senior leaders kind of already had an inkling, but they wanted to hear directly from the program managers themselves that certain systems would be highly impacted, specifically like our data pools, right? And things that pull data from it, right? So after we had that initial meeting, now we needed to go into a little bit more in depth. And so I developed this quad chart and I gave this to the PMs. I said, hey, look, this is the information that we're looking for. Thank you for giving us your initial assessment. I've already filled in some of the information. I created a slide deck for our slide, a single slide for each system, right? And I started pulling out these specific details. And so we went from the broader impact level to now the more granular on the 40 systems that we identified that had impact, and we started pulling information in this, and it was working. It was good. It was a little bit difficult to stay organized with so many people involved, and I had recently come on board with being the ServiceNow executive sponsor, and so I was learning about ServiceNow at the time. I also explored other project management tools. ServiceNow was like already there, and I was already trying to learn it, and so I started moving this information over to ServiceNow in its project management tool, and just for my own tracking purposes. And it was really working for me. We had our regular meetings once a week with the cross-functional team, and this was across the major stakeholders, not just our IT section. I was just doing the IT part, but we were all still briefing out of slides, and I realized just how ineffective this was. It was disjointed. People were tracking things in different ways. There wasn't a lot of ability to like follow up on specific tasks, and people weren't tracking what other people were doing. So then I started talking to the project leads about they were the policy leads too, about SPM and how it's working for me. They saw it and they were okay, cool. So when the cross-functional team got organized, there was a sprint. It was about a 3-day sprint. Got organized. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, you are doing well with the SPM. We want to see how well it can be utilized for the overall project, not just the IT parts. And we want you to do the integrated master schedule." I was like, "Oh well, fine. I mean, I'd love to see if I can help. I'm just an IT guy. I was formerly an intelligence analyst, as Matt pointed out. I was a cryptologic language analyst, and I spent a lot of time in Korea. But I've always liked IT, and I've always leveraged technology to solve problems. This is exactly what I did here. It's just putting out fires, helping people out. And so I was like, fine, I'll be happy to work it out and put everything into SPM and see where it goes, right? So I got invited to the cross-functional team sprint, and uh, it was roughly about, in my breakout session, roughly about 100 people or so, across all different areas, and they started talking about their individual requirements. Okay, and those individual requirements then get flushed out. First, I started with a my own sort of breakout, which was about 20 or so tasks, right? And this came from, and I wanted to use a structure that everyone I could dial back to. Uh, this is what we do in the military. So I used a user guide for building an integrated master plan and master schedule. I pointed to that and I said, hey, look, here is documented policy that I'm leveraging to accomplish this task. I'm not just pulling it from nowhere, right? And it was important that, to me at least, I thought that it came from the military, it came from the DoD. It was easier to garner buy-in that way, right? We were talking a bit about garnering buy-in from all these stakeholders. They all have their own disparate problems, and we need to get to come together so we can agree. Okay, an appropriate approach. I built out this plan in Excel. It's another thing that the military loves to use, is we always kind of revert back to Excel. And then I slowly migrated them over to adopting ServiceNow. And it's a better tool. We could have just continued using Excel, but that's arguably not, it's not good, right? We want to move over to something more integrated, something more reliable, something that won't just sit on a shelf and degrade and require constant updates. So, but I started out with Excel. Again, I started with the main, the lines of effort, right? There were about 9 of them. And then I identified tasks, I made suggestions, and then again, learning from previously when I was working with our program managers, to work in a collaborative space. So I opened this up to everybody in the room while I was standing in there. As you can see, I'm talking, everything like that. While everybody was in the room, I opened this up to them, put them in there, and I said, look, we're just going to start building tasks. And as we talk, you're going to think of new things. You're going to want to put stuff in there. Just get it in there, right? Anything and everything that you can think of that needs to get done in order to scroll the first cadre of warrant officers by the end of the calendar year. We need to just get it in there. And I explained this approach, right? So how it's outlined in this user guide is very, in my opinion, the same as what you would see outside of the military. They just adapted what works, right? So once you have an integrated master plan in place, you can translate it into an IMS, an integrated master schedule, which maps out the specific tasks and puts in and identifies as milestones, plans, start dates, end dates, that kind of stuff. But you have to start with an overall goal first, and then that's your work breakdown structure. The whole thing's work breakdown structure. You establish criteria, right, and accomplishments. Accomplishments are things that you want to see happen. The criteria are how it is that what states would need to be fleshed out before that is considered accomplished. That task is considered accomplished, and then the criteria, like what tasks are needed in order to get to that, right? And so eventually, what happened was, as I was explaining these things, when you look at things from a 50,000-foot view, it can be very overwhelming. But as you start to break it down into its parts, it starts to become more actionable. That was the whole intent, right? Give them a take this overwhelming task and make it something actionable. And it could go all the way down to, I need to send an email to a guy. Okay, great. You send an email to a guy, that starts this chain reaction. And so now that that's accomplished, then you can do this. And when I was in the discussions with them, we came up with uh, the overall like policy, the onboarding, the pay, and various other areas and stuff. And I know this looks very waterfall, because it is, but once you start breaking out the big parts, you get to the medium-sized chunks, and eventually you get down to the bite-sized chunks, and you're able to do more of the bite-sized chunks in conjunction with other bite-sized chunks, and that's where you get that agile, right? And you get people stopping from, well, I can't do my thing until that guy does their thing, or until we get this. Like, no, there are parts of what you can do that lead ultimately to what you're trying to accomplish, that you can do in conjunction while they're doing their thing. And it was basically just helping them understand that I was in no way an expert on any of their areas. They were the subject matter experts, but ultimately the discussions helped drill down into what specifics were required, so that they could finally wrap their heads around how to eat this elephant, for lack of a better term. So as we were doing this, and you might see how this kind of is reflective of what it was in Excel. I was building that in Excel. Each day, I would translate these points into ServiceNow, and then I started to show it. Right. So you can see here, it's kind of a little hard to see, right? But I had this other, I had a couple of screens behind me, and one of the screens always had the ServiceNow part to it. That way they could directly associate what they were working on in the Excel to what we were ultimately going to use as a project management tool. Okay. And so I translated these over. It's very, very easy because it breaks down in the exact same way that any project management tool would, right? And this is, of course, the Gantt chart. I added all the project tasks, started adding the timelines, identified them as milestones, and then started to create dependencies, and then slowly work them into the system. And this is because adoption is such a difficult thing to get, right? We had strong sponsorship, which is great, and then we had to translate that sponsorship into adoption. We had to train them, make sure that they had access, all of that stuff. So I was working all these things in conjunction. And then once the project got broken down and the 10 individual tasks were identified, people started completing the tasks. They started realizing the benefit of it. Then when we went back to our regular meetings on Tuesdays, I wanted to create, so I didn't want to just show the whole Gantt chart. We had over 250 tasks or something like that. We just scroll through all that. I didn't want to do that. The great thing about ServiceNow, it's like other project management tools, is you can dashboard out this stuff. And so I created a custom dashboard. I mean, it's custom, but it's out of the box. It's out of the box widgets. So you just configure the widgets to display the information that you want to. And I wanted to focus on something that would be beneficial to the CFT, the cross-functional team. So I focused in on tasks, the individual tasks that need to be completed. This is what so they're action officers. They're people who do the do. So that's what they're most interested in. That's certainly what I felt was the most important information. I could have done this based on just the project and overall completion, but again, it was better that we focus on what is the next thing that we need to do, and the next thing that we need to do, so on and so forth. So that's why you see here, I have, of course, the milestones. I have the overdue tasks, the overdue on their side, the pending tasks. That was a way to motivate them to actually update the tasks so that they were being properly tracked, had the right timeline and schedule and all that kind of stuff on there. The number of tasks that were created this week was a great way of showing like how the project is evolving and changing. Not changing in scope, but as you complete things, other things come about, you think of other things. So I also wanted to show how the project was evolving from where it started to where it is currently. How many tasks, of course, we do this week. Items needing decision was important for our senior leaders because that was something I wanted to draw their attention to. Things that we need them to make a decision on. For instance, constructive service credit was a big issue. Constructive service credit is recognizing individuals who have a certain degree of experience and should qualify for a higher grade, higher position based on that experience. You could start them off as a warrant officer one, but their expertise and knowledge really warrants a grade of warrant officer two. That's the idea. But then how to attribute a person's prior experience, what qualifies them, what's the threshold, all these kinds of things need to be decided, or all these things need to be figured out. But the decision point was whether to do this in the first place. So like when we identified like that issue, when the cross-functional team gathered and say, well, what about people who have tons of experience, right? I mean, why would we make them start off as warrant officer ones? They'd be less inclined to become warrant officers if their expertise or whatever was being disregarded. So then we were like, maybe we need something like constructive service credit, and so we need to put that item up for decision. And ultimately, our senior leaders decided to look into it. Say, yeah, go ahead and look into it. Great. All right. So, but that was up. I was up there. They said we needed you to make a decision on this. And I bring up the senior leaders because this dashboard is in fact briefed to our senior leaders, brought up to them so they can see and track the overall progress of all of the lines of effort for the project itself, as well as risk and issues. So, risk, for instance, if we do not establish constructive service credit, well, we might have less people interested in becoming warrant officers in the first place. That's a risk. An issue. Oh, our sprint teams and on the IT side of things, right? They're bogged down by modernization, right? And so perhaps we need to have more people, right, in that area. So like a possible issue here is that they might get too bogged down. So we wanted to capture that. So put all that stuff in there. And essentially, how we run this down is we go line by line. Each LOE talks specifically about like what things are going on, how they're making progress, issues, and we can drill down. The great thing about these dashboards is you can drill down into any of them. If I wanted to click the overdue task, I could click that, and then it would just give me a list of what the overdue tasks on all the details associated with that. And then last but not least, the progress pie chart. It's great to throw in visuals, especially for senior leaders. They can capture the information much quicker that way. And so we've seen the pie chart, of course, close more and more. So more get that blue portion just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's what we like to see, as well as the percentage complete over there. Those are the number of tasks. It rolls it all the way up too. So if the parent task has two subtasks underneath it, and only one of those subtasks is completed, the parent task would be set at 50%, et cetera, et cetera. So simplistic but very essential, right? And then automatic too. You don't have to set that yourself. It does that automatically. So ultimately, that's why I enjoyed using SPM for this particular effort. In fact, it was so well received that they tried to track all the Great Power Competition efforts in ServiceNow. It didn't come to fruition because there's so many. It involves so many other stakeholders and they had different ways of wanting to do things. It unfortunately didn't get the buy-in that we needed, but we could have done that because it really does it, regardless of scale. You should be able to track projects, and this has happened, track projects with thousands upon thousands of tasks and programs, portfolios. It's all there, all integrated, and it's a really, really great tool. And so with that, I did want to talk briefly about the project success. So we did manage to succeed. We did succeed in scrolling the first cadre of warrant officers. It was the end of summer of this year that we announced 78 warrant officers were selected, and 30 or so of them are right now. 30 of them, I think specifically, are in class right now, and they're due to graduate at the end of December. The next class is going to start shortly after that, and we're just going to keep rolling in more and more warrant officers. We're going to talk about maybe expanding the program. Ultimately, this project itself, its closeout is at the end of December because that our goal was to scroll the first cadre of warrant officers. Now we're talking about more sustainment and what it takes to continue the project without our project lead's direct involvement. So it's evolved and it's become a part of the Air Force as a whole. So we've already started those discussions, and we're looking into what's needed to do that. So I feel like we've largely been successful, and it is massive. The main reason, right, is because of all the great expertise and people that came together that were willing to have this discussion and really drill down and work hard to see that the secretary's intent be fulfilled. And it was really, really awesome to work on this project, to continue working on this project. And with that, I look forward to any questions that you may have. And thank you very much for your time. That concludes my brief.
Yep. A few questions to kick things off, and then if anyone has a question, raise your hand. I can either unmute you or you can put it in chat, and we'll moderate. But you mentioned that DoD, in your experience, is still very like slideology and spreadsheet heavy. Is that how they look at project management, or is there a pivot to using modernized platforms and the ServiceNow offerings and uh, better ways of tracking that use automation and out of the box automation.
Mhm. Yeah, so there is an active effort to modernize and to be using modernized platforms and processes for these things. I would argue it's not fast enough, and we need to be even faster, even more agile, mainly due to the fact that our adversaries are also doing the same things. And one could argue that they're getting better faster than we are. Right, that we're still very far ahead of them, but the rate of which that we are improving our processes and especially when it comes to our technologies, adapting better technologies, better systems, these kinds of things, the rate of which we're getting better is not the same as their rate of they're getting better faster. And so we need to be able to not only just continue our lead over them, but we need to be able to outpace their improvements, right? So that we can stay on top. And when it comes to project management as a whole, I mean, the military, of course, is a government organization. It's filled with bureaucracy. There's lots of roadblocks, barriers, these kinds of things we have to get through. I believe that we're headed in the right direction. It's just, I believe that we do need to move faster. We do need to work harder, and we need to be open to more agile practices. Really, just think innovatively in what the next thing is beyond agile, even.
Great. I think we have a lot of public sector and private sector attendees on the line, and when Microsoft Project pivoted from more of a desktop solution to Project Online, and we see, the big tech companies also providing program and project management tools. What are some of the limitations that you've seen of either the ServiceNow solution or its competitors that you'd like to see improved in a perfect world?
Yeah, in a perfect world, I'd like to see ServiceNow be more user friendly. I think that user experience is by far the most important quality that these systems have, and that they integrate and flow well with other applications. Um, but ServiceNow's limitations are largely due to its integrations. So, I mean, it's a tool, right? And if you integrate it into your processes properly, then it will do wonders for you. Much like a lot of other things, right? It's not necessarily going to do the job for you. It just provides you with the resources to do so. If you don't know how to hammer a nail properly, it's going to be difficult to build a house. Even if you're a really good expert, that hammer is going to do wonders for you, right? So on their end, on ServiceNow side, and it doesn't have to be, it could be on anything, on any technology side. I want them to be better with the user experience, make it more intuitive and easier to use, always. Increase the functionality exponentially and the integrations across the board. My Tesla knows when I'm getting into my car for a scheduled meeting and I have a location that I'm going to, my Tesla automatically pulls up and maps my route for me without me doing anything. I think that's very innovative and very good. It saves me the time of having to do that. Maybe it's first world problems, but like I thought it was very cool that it did that, and I'd like to see that more in our technology and that adaptation. Knowing automatically what we're trying to do here, and then on our end, we need to be better integrators. We need to be better users of the tool, and scale with the tool ourselves and our knowledge and our ability to utilize it.
Great. Any other questions that any of the attendees have? Okay. Well, oh, are you exploring AI, and can you speak to kind of what AI's place in human resource management IT is for DoD?
Yeah, I mean, AI is wonderful. Talk about exponential uh, technology improvement, right? So, I mean, I utilize it all the time. I use natural language generation, large language models. I use AI to help me with my schedule. um, uh, and I think that we will, as a military, as a government, um, we can excel the by more fast more um, being more fast in adapting AI. Um, so AI itself is not really beyond anything after outside of narrow intelligence. Narrow intelligence is just automated workflow, faster faster workflow processes and automation, that kind of stuff. And once we get to the general intelligence, I think that especially in like the HR landscape, it's going to be incredibly useful. One use case that I was recently exploring was the use of AI in mentoring and identifying mentors and mentees based on the data that the system has. So essentially matching them, much like dating software would, but match them based off of their profiles, but take it a step further than that, interpret the person's profile and their experiences. You can say something like, well, I was deployed to Afghanistan. Okay, around this time. Well, what does that mean? What's something beyond just saying this person had a deployment on their belt? I feel like our current automations can obviously see that, like, you want to be tied with other people who are deployed. Well, someone who deployed to Afghanistan, someone who deployed to Iraq, they have less compatibility than somebody who also was in Afghanistan, right? They would have similar experiences, more of that kind of stuff. And so looking into and thinking generatively, right, about the information that we have, the HR information that we have, so that we can better align people to potential mentors or mentees automatically, and sort of help create ideally a organic meeting space for that, so that develop people better. That was just one use case. But just a filtering of unstructured data will be so useful, unbelievably useful. So if we can use AI to help us with our unstructured data and all of the desperate knowledge that we have all over the place, consolidating that, we'd be so much more efficient and be able to streamline a lot of processes.
Okay, if no other questions, we'll make sure the slides are available. Everyone will be receiving a post-experience survey to give feedback both to the chapter as well as to our presenter, Mr. Groff. And just another quick plug for upcoming programs. So next week there's a few IT industry events that there's links to. They're not ran by the chapter, but we just try to keep an eye on what's available for chapter members. And thank you, Mr. Groff, for your time today and all the great work that you're doing for our service members. And hopefully this leads to better retention in the future. Is there a retention target or KPI or metrics that have been established to?
We're still refining those numbers. What is best. Um, I think ultimately we'll find out as we progress, and the numbers that we started off with, we thought we needed, was a lot higher than what we probably need. But yeah, so we've already started refining those numbers, but we don't have anything specifically accurate yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you again very much for everyone's time and for inviting me to speak on this. I really enjoyed building this presentation, and I hope you got something out of it.
Yep, we sure did.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Hoping everyone has a great weekend.